In the summer of 2018, the Aransas Pass City Council instructed city staff to emphasize cleaning up the community. Part of that effort involves demolishing dilapidated structures. Also that summer, the city attorney reported to the city council on how to accomplish the demolition goal. This is that report to the city council.
Vibrant and healthy communities are so important to every city, including the city of Aransas Pass. The citizens of Aransas Pass recently completed a survey where 73% of our citizens wanted to make sure that we clean up the city, and 95% said we needed to focus on code enforcement. So as your city attorney, I'm here today to present to you options, ways that we can clean up this community together to make sure that our city council, our city administration, and more importantly, our community are all on the same page. Vacant substandard structures have significant impacts on our city. So the building official, the code enforcement official, myself, and other city administrators got together and we sat down at a table. We began to look at our city and find out what is happening. Where are these vacant substandard structures and how are they impacting us? So we decided to get in a car and we drove around town. And we learned that there's basically two different types of structures. There are black structures and they're gray structures. For simplicity, black is a structure that there's no possible way to get it repaired. It is completely demolished and needs to be completely brought down. The gray structures are structures where there might be some hope. Actually, someone may even want to repair a structure that should be demolished based on personal reasons or historical reasons. And so for today's purposes, we're only going to talk about the black structures, the structures where anyone looking at the structure would be able to say that needs to go. So we got in that car and we began to drive around town. And this is what we found in our city. These are some of the most dangerous top 8 vacant dilapidated structures in our city. In fact, these 8 structures altogether have received 143 phone calls for emergency services in the past 3 years. What does that cost? $67,000 to respond. But don't worry, we got some taxes out of it. Only about $15,000 though. Vacant and dilapidated structures actually have more cost than just responding to an emergency call. In fact, these costs can value up into the tens of thousands of dollars. Let's just take a look at what some of those costs might be. Crime costs are such an important cost, and they're such a burden to our city's budget. In fact, Austin did a study and found that crime rates on blocks with abandoned structures are 2 times higher than a block with not an abandoned structure. Fire costs can also burden a city. In fact, the U.S. Fire Administration says that 12,000 fires are started in vacant structures in the United States. And out of those 12,000 fires per year, 6,000 firefighters are injured. In fact, there's also mowing and cleaning cost. A city who has to go and mow and clean these vacant structures with lots that are high weeds can get enormous. Detroit, Michigan, for example, a city with some serious issues and almost in bankruptcy, actually spent almost $800,000 one year mowing and cleaning these vacant structures. And then there's demolition cost. For those property owners who fail to demolish structures, a city can go through the legal process to demolish them at the city's cost with a lien on the property. But those liens and the money that has to be forked out can be enormous. For example, St. Louis, over a 5-year period, spent $15.5 million demolishing structures. And of course, if you're going to demolish a structure, you're going to have to hire that attorney to make sure that all your legal bases are covered. So there's always those attorney costs involved. Thus far, we've been talking about vacant, dilapidated structures as if they were their own simple entity, but in reality, they're in our communities. In fact, they're properties that surround these vacant structures. Philadelphia did a study and found that properties within 100 to 300 feet of vacant structures have lower property values up to the tune of $10,000. But again, it's not just about the surrounding community, it's also about that vacant structure. You know, can you imagine these vacant structures? At one point, they were alive and vibrant with people working in them. One of these structures was a fish market that at one point employed 200 people and actually sent off shrimp and seafood to places like New York and other exotic places. A vibrant commercial structure that actually had 200 people working on it brings sales tax. It increases the property value itself along with the personal property in that commercial property. Bringing our businesses back alive again and filled with people is so important. So it's not just about a vacant structure. It's about the people who can be in it, working in it, producing, and making our communities a healthy and safe place to live. So we admit we have vacant, dilapidated structures in our city. What do we do and how do we resolve this? There are many methods that people use around the country to resolve these issues. Today, I want to talk to you about 4 of those methods that I think will be the most productive in our city. The first method is something just called a meet and greet. And this is where the city attorney and the building official would sit down with the property owner of the vacant commercial structure to learn about what the issues are, why hasn't the structure come down, and what can we do to bring it back into production. A second legal method is to issue a notice of violation and a citation. The problem with this is that the citation, a property owner can come into court and pay off the violation and the structure remains standing. It doesn't solve the problem, but it is an enforcement tool that can be used in appropriate circumstances. And then your city council, as the governing body, has created a Building and Standards Commission. And this Building and Standards Commission is made up of people in your community that have very certain specialties, such as engineering, architect, or building standards. And they listen as judges to property owners talk about the issues involving their structures. The commission has the authority to order the property owner to either vacate, demolish, or repair structures. And if they fail to do it within a certain time period, that commission can actually award penalties against the property owners, lien holders, and mortgagees for the structures. Property owners, lien holders, and mortgagees oftentimes want to comply, especially when they see the amount of penalties that that board can order. And then, of course, there is the traditional legal method of just filing a civil lawsuit against the property owner, lien holder, and mortgagees. Filing a little civil lawsuit is an easy thing to do. It's the actual litigation process that costs significant money. And as a city, we'd much rather have the property owners use that litigation cost to reproduce that property as opposed to paying for lawyers. As your city attorney, I've been talking about demolishing structures, but it's not just about demolishing structures. I've worked with the U.S. Department of Justice, and we have worked around the country learning about different methods to prevent vacant structures, not only demolish them, but how to rebuild and reuse them. In the future, we intend to do these things, not only demolish, but reuse and eventually prevent, so that we can have a city that we're all very, very proud of.